There's a reason the Norse settled some of the harshest environments on Earth and still held their ground through winters that would cripple most modern households. Before iron stoves, before insulated panels, and long before central heating, they engineered a winterproofing method so effective that archaeologists studying Viking longhouses still marvel at how these structures remained warm, dry and habitable through months of brutal snowstorms. Stay with this opening minute, because the technique we're talking about isn't just historical trivia. It is a blueprint for low-tech warmth, energy efficiency and storm resilience that still works in modern off-grid living. If you've ever wondered how people survived deep cold without the tools we take for granted, this is one of the most ingenious answers ever designed. Norse winters in Iceland, Norway and Greenland weren't just cold. They were endurance tests. Snow piled heavy, wind cut through clothing, and temperatures dropped so low that exposed livestock could freeze within hours. Yet the Viking homestead, built largely from timber, turf, stone and the earth itself, created indoor climates where families could cook, craft, sleep and tend fires without losing heat to the elements. The genius wasn't the fire. Every culture used fire. The difference was how the Vikings controlled airflow, insulation and radiant heat, so the fire's warmth lasted long after the flames died down. The Viking winter house worked because it used earth turf and structure to trap heat where it mattered. At the heart of the technique was the semi-subterranean design. Instead of building fully above ground, where wind exposure was highest, Viking winter houses were dug partially into the earth. This lowered profile created natural insulation because soil maintains a stable temperature far warmer than the winter air. A modern grower or off-grid builder can apply this same principle by building berms around structures or, half-bearing sheds, root cellars or livestock shelters. Even lowering a structure by half a metre drastically cuts wind exposure and reduces heat loss. Over this earthen foundation, the Vikings stacked thick stone or timber walls. But honestly, the real insulation came from turf blocks layered over the exterior. Turf is dense, full of roots, and holds pockets of air, creating a natural thermal barrier stronger than any wool blanket. This turf layer could reach the thickness of an arm, and when 2 or 3 layers were stacked, the house essentially became wrapped in a living, breathing insulation jacket. Anyone today dealing with cold winds or high-altitude climates can, replicate this through earthen berm insulation, straw bale skirts around dwellings, or even turf-based garden wall panels to block wind. Inside, Vikings narrowed heat loss further with low ceiling beams. The lower the ceiling, the less warm air rises beyond reach. This is something modern cabins often forget. A heater in a tall room warms the rafters while the people shiver below. Norse builders eliminated this problem by controlling the interior height so warmth pooled where families actually lived and worked. Applying this today can be as simple as, installing a temporary winter ceiling, lowering rafters with lightweight boards, or creating sleeping lofts closer to the heat source. The central hearth was, the anchor of the system, and served as both heater and regulator. Contrary to those romantic images of roaring bonfires, Viking longhouses actually used controlled moderate fires that burned long and slow. The stone-bordered hearth in the centre radiated heat outward, but the real trick was how the heat was managed. Warmth seeped directly into the earthen floor, turning the entire ground into, a sort of thermal battery. Stone and packed soil absorbed heat through the day and released it gradually at night. This low-tech radiant heating method is honestly still one of the most efficient approaches ever used. To apply this principle, a modern homesteader can store heat in masonry cob benches, clay floors, or simple stonework around stoves and fire pits. Even outdoor cooking areas benefit from heat mass retention because they maintain warmth long after the fire fades, reducing the need for constant fuel. Ventilation was equally strategic. A controlled roof vent allowed smoke to escape while retaining as much warmth as possible. The vent was not left wide open. It was narrow, carefully positioned above the hearth and adjusted depending on wind direction. Those managing smoke in small cabins or off-grid sheds can use the same logic by installing adjustable vents and orienting them to the prevailing winter winds. The interior layout was engineered for survival and resource efficiency. Families slept along raised platforms lining the walls. These platforms kept them off the colder ground and created pockets of warmer air near the body. Beneath the platforms, the Vikings stored dry goods, textiles, and tools that benefited from the stable warmth. Livestock were sometimes sheltered in adjoining spaces because their body heat contributed to the thermal environment. This wasn't superstition, it was practical thermodynamics. Today, survivalists and homesteaders can use similar strategies by storing sensitive equipment along interior walls, creating raised sleeping platforms, and positioning water containers or composting systems near thermal sources. Even urban growers can use insulated corner zones to store seeds or protect delicate tools from cold damage. The turf, earth and stone system worked because it created stability, not just, temporary warmth. The real brilliance of the winter house was that it didn't depend on constant attention. Once built, it created a stable microclimate. Storms could rage outside, but inside, humidity stayed consistent, fires burned efficiently, and families could work uninterrupted. Unlike modern heating systems that shut down during power failures, the Viking approach relied only on materials and physics. For preppers, off-grid enthusiasts, and history lovers, this method shows how resilient design can outthink even the worst weather. Anyone building a shed, greenhouse wall, animal shelter, or off-grid cabin can adopt variations of this method. By combining earth contact, thick outer layers, interior heat mass, and controlled ventilation, you can replicate the core advantages of a Viking winter house without copying it brick for brick. If you found this historical deep dive useful and want more forgotten engineering methods that still work today, make sure you subscribe to In the Beginning, and share this guide with someone who loves history as much as you do.